Do you think in a remake that Kevin Hart would play Argyle?
Chris Tucker.
He's a little too old.
What, you too old? You'd be too old to be a limo driver? I've seen old limo driver. My uncle's a limo driver. He's like 50-something.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked ass. We're gonna die.
Welcome back to Shat the Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, were the movies we love when growing up really that good? My name is Roger Roper, also known as The Raj, and alongside me I've got two co-hosts, Dick Ebert, Big D.
Hello, how are you?
And our newcomer, Gene Lyons.
Ho, 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 Gene Lyons.
And each week we take a look back in time and decide if our favorite films from the 80s and 90s still hold up. Each week our audience selects from 4 movie choices that we then break out our VHS tape rewinders and watch the movie that tallied the highest number of votes. Tonight's movie is one of my favorites, especially from an action perspective, and it's also the thematic song for the podcast. It's Die Hard, guys. Yes.
I think it was great. It was a nice, refreshing reminder of what made 80s action so enjoyable.
Yeah, there were a lot of really great 80s action movies, and I think that with this movie, you started to see action movies kind of take a turn move away from the big schlock-tastic movies like, Commando or Predator. As great as those movies are, and Rambo, they still have some schlockiness to the movie. This was like the first one where you could actually relate to the action hero.
Yeah, I think John McClane was an everyman. He wasn't huge like Schwarzenegger or huge like Stallone. He was a regular guy. He had problems at home. He was a smart ass. He got his ass kicked quite a bit throughout the movie. And I like that he didn't always make the right decision. He would do a lot of things that he would just kind of throw caution to the wind, and it got him into some tight spots, but he'd always fight his way out. And I think that's why he was so likable. Gene, you think that's why Die Hard stayed in the consciousness of us now 30 and 40-year-olds?
I mean, I think it really did all of that, plus pushing movies to a place where we just hadn't gone. We talked previously about The Lost Boys and how it was a horror comedy. Well, this was an action comedy, but it actually nailed the comedy part. It wasn't laughing at itself. It was actually making you laugh. They absolutely nailed it. This movie recalibrated everything that I've heard on Shat the Movies as far as this is the benchmark for the best movie, I think, that has been recorded on this podcast.
Do you feel like he broke the fourth wall? Was John talking to us all the time, or was he just that his character? He liked to narrate his daily actions.
I think that without breaking the wall there, and that's why I think it's such an effective exercise in screenwriting, is that he's not like Deadpool. He's not looking straight at the camera and to the audience. He may be looking at the camera and saying what the audience is thinking, but still playing within the character. And I think that's why it's such an effective movie and still holds up.
And it's not just John McClane who does that in this movie. There's several other characters who kind of are doing commentary on it. There's a scene where Ellis, who is arguably the worst performance in this entire movie, and he asks Hans Gruber, he's like, "What are my hands? A method actor?" It's like, yeah, you are, buddy. And it's like, it was satisfying when I'm going, wow, this guy is terrible. And then the movie's like, yeah, we know he's terrible. He's written that way. Like, enjoy.
And for as much credit as Bruce Willis gets for this movie and the fact that it was his first big screen movie, and at the time he was only known for Moonlighting. I mean, even though it's 1988, Bruce Willis was still unknown. I think the bigger credit needs to go to Alan Rickman. This was his first feature film, and he nailed what it really means to be like an effective villain.
Oh, absolutely. He is the best villains are the ones that kind of seduce you in a weird way, where you're in a strange way kind of rooting for them. I mean, you still want to see them lose, but you don't want them to be out of the movie, like you just want them to stick around. and he absolutely kills it. And it's great because he's got this amazing mix of panache and sophistication, with just also ruthlessness, right?
Yeah, and also it not only did it introduce the world to Alan Rickman, it introduced the world to Alan Rickman. Like, I believe when someone does an Alan Rickman, they run up to the character and then they do a close-up, really like nose to nose, and they say something like creepy or something strange. Like, that was the Alan Rickman move. In every Alan Rickman movie, there's a run-up to the other character that Alan Rickman does. It gets really, really uncomfortably close to their face.
And there's also the recitation of numbers. From Harry Potter to this movie, there's a scene where he's just rattling off numbers about Mr. Tagaki's, history. Everything that now you could find on Google, but back in the 80s, if you knew that much about a guy, you knew everything about his life. And he's just rattling off 1984. And again, later in the movie, they just keep giving him numbers to say, because they're like, that's what he does best. He reads numbers.
So this movie also stars just some recognizable faces that you just enjoyed seeing. Reginald Van Johnson, he plays Al Powell, Sergeant Al Powell. He is also known for was this his audition tape for Family Matters? Did they just see him in a police officer suit and say, give that guy a sitcom?
I mean, yeah, when he said his name and it wasn't Carl, I was like, it's not Carl Winslow? Oh, yeah. Al Powell. Okay, I guess. Same guy.
Also, Paul Gleason, who plays Deputy Chief
Dwayne T. Robinson. And we remember him from The Breakfast Club, where he played the teacher in charge of the group getting detention on the weekends.
Yeah. Die Hard also represents the third time that we've done a movie from 1988. 1988, as we've discussed before, was fantastic for movies. The top 10 was Rain Man, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Coming to America, Big, Twins, Crocodile Dundee 2, Die Hard, Naked Gun, Cocktail, and Beetlejuice. So three out of the top 10 movies in 1988 we've done. So but of those, I still think Big, as we'll get into right now, is the best of the bunch.
Oh, I think the movie was fantastic. I try to watch these with my wife, who's Brazilian, and this one was the first one that she really remembered. So we know it's international. John McClane, Die Hard. It was big in Brazil, so it's a legitimate movie that's worth our time.
So the movie opens on an airplane. John McClane is flying into L.A. to meet up with his estranged wife, Holly, at her corporate Christmas party at the Nakatomi Towers for the Nakatomi Corporation. The first thing I noticed right off the bat, and maybe this is just living in a post 9/11 world, is how much better it was to fly before 9/11.
Oh, sure. You got plenty of space, not a lot of people on the plane. You can bring your gun. What's not to love?
There was smoking in airplanes and airports. You could meet people at the gate. There were like fun family reunions that would happen right in front of you. Like going to the airports used to be like a fun thing to do, and that was well portrayed here, right in the opening scenes of Die Hard.
But my thought is, why is the person sitting next to John so concerned that he sees he has a firearm? They've landed in California. I would anticipate a terrorist would have done something in the 8 hours prior to landing.
You're saying if you're just out in public on a plane, a bus, getting dinner, and you see a guy with a gun, you don't just take a second look? I mean, I'm a gun owner, and I'm still like, whoa, it's a gun.
But if you were if you were to say to you, it's okay, I'm a cop, you'd immediately be fine with that, right?
Oh, yeah, then I'm perfectly comfortable.
Because nobody would lie about that. No, I would be slightly concerned, and I would get off the plane. Yeah. If I saw it mid-flight, it would worry me. But while we're landing, I don't get it. Yeah. But are we led to believe that John is grabbing the hand rest? Is a man who will throw himself out of an 80-story building, he'll kill terrorists with his bare hands, he's proficient with every type of firearm and explosives, is afraid of flying?
I mean, this plays right back into the fact that we were talking about those vulnerabilities. He's an everyman. He's not an action hero. He's just a guy who was thrust into an action movie. Makes perfect sense.
Yeah, there's only a few action movie stars, or there's only a few action movies that I can think of where they pull off this, and it's a trope. Listen, it's supposed to show that our hero has vulnerability and give you some, the fact that, hey, he's just like me quality to the lead character. And I feel like Die Hard and Indiana Jones are the only two like movies that I felt can effectively do that. With Indiana Jones, it was the snakes. And with Die Hard, it's a plane, but they're both subtle. Like Indiana Jones, they're not constantly putting him in situations with snakes all the time. I love movies where they can effectively show a character's weakness without, beating it over the head or making it super silly. So I like that. But also at the every airport in the 80s also had a limo driver picking you up. And that's where we're introduced to the character of Argyle. Argyle is one of my favorite characters, but I feel like Argyle has also made some pretty bad decisions throughout the course of the movie.
I think he makes great decisions. He besides the fact that he admits he's a rookie limo driver, he stays, he sees an opportunity to extend the fare, and he tells John, hey, at the end of the day, remember, give me a good tip. He hangs out in the parking garage, talks to his ladies on the phone, and drinks. Those are good decisions.
So Argyle drives John McClane up to Nakatomi Tower. And once John is at Nakatomi Towers, he goes up to the 30th floor where they're having a holiday Christmas party, and he meets the CEO of the company. He sees his estranged wife, and he also meets Ellis, the company cocaine addict.
Shit in this movie is so cool already. You got Argyle, who's listening to Christmas in Hollis in the limo and letting John McClane sit up in the front and interacting with his giant bear. You've got Holly, the wife, with her gigantic 80s hair. You've got Ellis, who's snorting coke. You've got the guy I also feel was in every 80s movie was the Asian guy who also just sounds like an old white guy at the same time. I mean, everything is going perfectly already. And there's yoga pants. There's dudes kissing dudes. Like, the movie is off to just a rocking start.
Did you feel that John McClane was a little homophobic when the guy came up and kissed him on the cheek?
I didn't take it that way. I mean, I thought that, they're just drunk at a party in LA is just kind of loose like that. John McClane's kind of an old school New York cop, tough guy. And he's just kind of like shocked by LA because he doesn't seem like, I mean, he does give the guy a little shove, but I think it's more of just like I'm not ready for LA, not I'm not ready for homosexuals.
Okay, well then explain the next time when he's interacting with the CEO who just paid for a limo. He's like, I think he says, "Oh, I didn't know they celebrated Christmas in Japan." Like, is that something that you would come out and say?
He's trying to get Holly fired, I think. They're really trying to show that New York and LA are different, and John's a fish out of water.
But then it got me thinking: do they actually celebrate Christmas in Japan?
I honestly was torn between thinking that it is a racist comment, and he's just making it because John is intimidated by the success and the opulence of the Nakatomi Corporation. Or at the same time, maybe he just really doesn't know whether or not they celebrate Christmas in Japan. It's an honest question.
I'm Googling this right now because I really, truly want to know the answer to this. Do the Japanese celebrate Christmas?
The Christian ones do.
Oh, it's number 4 on the Google autofill. In Japan, just so we know, Christmas is known more as a time to celebrate and spread happiness than a religious celebration. Christmas Eve is often celebrated more than Christmas Day. It's thought of as a romantic day. So I think that John McClane should have known this. Maybe in the 80s you didn't know this.
You didn't know it until you just Googled it. Why do you expect John to know it?
I feel like in every 80s movie, every Japanese corporation was the model of success. But what did Nakatomi actually do?
I don't think we know. We're led to believe maybe it's some kind of a financial or there's some kind of an investment corporation. But I think possibly it was a shell corporation for the Yakuza. And I base this on when we finally get into the vault, there's not just paper investments and negotiable bearer bonds. We see some antiquities. We see some Japanese samurai armor. We see some swords. We see a lot of antiquities. It looks like this was a vault not only for storing and safekeeping currency and investment, but also for hiding antiques.
You know who else might have Japanese antiquities? Japanese people. It doesn't mean it's the Yakuza. That we're off to a raucous, racist start on this podcast.
This is a corporation. This is not a personal holding. How many corporations, store their valuable antiquities in their office building?
I think Big D is actually onto something here because Die Hard is based on a book called Nothing Lasts Forever. Nothing Lasts Forever is a sequel to The Detective. The company in the book was the Klaxon Corporation. The Klaxon Corporation had some behind the scenes, some nefarious actions with Chile's military dictatorship. That was the story. And in fact, the terrorists made that their goal to go into the Klaxon Corporation in the book and steal the money because they felt like you shouldn't be doing business with a military dictatorship. So they were it was kind of like a Robin Hood type situation there. And they kind of allude to that in the beginning where Hans Gruber says, well, listen, you guys, I only want to take 64 million or $640 million out of cash. $640 million in bonds. He said, you guys do business that in 10 days. I think Nakatomi is up to some no good.
That vault is not standard. If it was investments, they'd be insured. The sheer technology and the 7 layers of security, and that Joe T, he seems a bit surprised that Gruber knows what's in the vault. So I don't think these are legally obtained gains. I think this is definitely some form of gang-related.
If only Quentin Tarantino had directed this, he could have just made it a glowing light in there. We would never really know, and everyone could have their own theory and be happy.
But I also think that there was some craziness going on because you're seeing some wild, it's a wild party happening during Christmas Eve. You're seeing cocaine being openly snorted off desks. There's sexual harassment. People are just screwing on conference tables and in bathrooms. You don't do that at like a Fortune 500 up and up company.
And these are some wild people because there's the scene where there's some people interrupted mid-coitus, and that lady, she doesn't cover up her boobs and run out of the room. No, she spreads her wings like an eagle and lets those freedom titties fly.
Yeah, and not only are people doing coke, Joe Takagi walks into an office. He's the head of the company and sees Ellis blowing lines on the desk and doesn't even flinch. Do you think if this is Merrill Lynch that flies, or if this is Apple, would that happen?
Definitely at Merrill Lynch, and that's the reason for the meltdown in 2008.
Cocaine.
But you make a good point about the vault, Big D. Any normal corporation wouldn't have a vault with that level of security. Not only that, but Nakatomi Tower seems to be an indestructible tower. Like multiple times, they blow up this building. It doesn't fall. It's still standing.
Well, I think that's just the power of Japanese engineering, and really what we have here is a repeat of World War II, where it's America facing off against both Japan and the Germans. And speaking of the Germans, that entrance by the terrorist squad is so no nonsense. I absolutely loved it. Just walk in, shoot the guy, and get the ball rolling, and then beauty of all beauties, Alan Rickman walks onto the screen and changes our lives forever.
They're completely efficient. They're the opposite of the LAPD, FBI, and SWAT team. They come in, like you said, they have their jobs, they go about doing it, with the exception of the one terrorist who decides to take out a chainsaw and cut out all the telephone cables while the other guy is trying to disarm the alarm. Other than that, they're military, they're refined, they're typical German skilled tradesmen.
Do Germans make the best movie villains?
I don't know. I think we'll get into that a little bit, where we talk about the transition of terrorists and their national origin throughout the 80s and 90s. But I think they're quite frightening. They're pretty good. They're no nonsense.
As a Middle Easterner, I'm just happy it's anybody but us. So I was very glad to see the Germans take the stage.
I think it was one of the more handsome terrorist groups. They all had nice long hair. They looked great. They were an attractive bunch, with the exception of Yuli, Eddie the American, the only member of the group, and, maybe I think Franco was a bit. But they also all came to do work. They were wearing matching sweatpants and sweat tops. They need to have free movement. I like that in my terrorists.
From what I understand, this group wasn't even German actors or actors that even knew German, but rather they picked them because they looked menacing. And if you notice, every one of them, in contrast to Bruce Willis, incredibly tall. They were all like 6'8".
The Germans picked up on the fact that there was no real Germans and were so offended by the portrayal of the Germans, they actually changed the background of those characters, of the villains, when it was released in Germany. They said they were just European. They were just European terrorists. So the one terrorist, though, I could have sworn that was Huey Lewis, right?
You're talking about Eddie.
Oh,
Eddie was the only American member of the group.
Like, I had no idea that wasn't Huey Lewis. I even wrote in my show notes, that's Huey Lewis, right?
Now, Huey Lewis is a beautiful man. That guy is not fit to hold Huey Lewis's jockstrap, man. Come on, get real.
Oh, plus the actor who played Eddie died the next year. And I could have sworn he was 45, 50 years old. He was actually only 38 when he died. So he'd lived a hard life.
Well, this goes back to Roger thinking that the Lost Boys were all in their 30s when clearly Kiefer Sutherland was only 21 when he shot the movie. So in the 80s, I think everyone just looked old. I mean, Holly in this movie, you'd think that the hero's wife is supposed to be some babe. She looks like a mom. Well, she is a mom.
But did you also think that Hans Gruber was kind of a nice guy? Like, for a main villain, he was pretty reasonable. Like, when it came to hostage requests, he allowed Ellis to sell him on why they should let the hostages go. I feel like there were some friendly, efficient terrorists.
No, Hans Gruber it's exactly it. He's making logical decisions. Up until blowing up the top of the building, everything's pretty logical. So he's like, yeah, it makes sense. You got to go to the bathroom. Do that. You know what? I'm not going to let you take the pregnant lady into the office so she can get on a couch, but we'll bring the couch out to you. But the guy is also, when he says 1, 2, 3, I'm going to shoot you in the fucking face, he's going to shoot you in the fucking face. He's not fucking around.
So they're trying to steal $640 million in bearer bonds. A bearer bond, you don't need to sign for a bearer bond. If you just have a bearer bond in your possession, the bank just gives you whatever that money is. So it's untraceable money.
Do these things still exist?
No, they don't exist anymore. Well, they're not as popular anymore because they used to be a way of like stashing. They used to be like a way to escape, like as a tax haven. So again, I think that there's some nefarious actions happening within Nakatomi Towers. Like, why would you just have $640 million in untraceable bearer bonds?
When Gruber has the gun, to Joe T's head, he claims he can't open the vault. I think it's much like in Batman, The Dark Knight, where the bank manager is afraid. He says, do you know who this money belongs to? Do you know who you're robbing? I think Joe T is afraid to open the vault because he knows his entire family in Japan will be killed.
I think that other movies have copied Die Hard. I mean, that scene with the vault that's almost impenetrable, that was definitely in The Dark Knight. The scene where John McClane is jumping off the roof into the building office window, that's like in Mission Impossible. It's in The Matrix. Die Hard definitely has influenced a lot of modern action movies.
What about the end scene with Gruber falling off the building slow-mo? Did that not remind you of the Joker?
Oh, without a doubt.
Except for when the Joker was falling to his death, they didn't cut to a scene of Dwayne Robinson saying, I hope that's not a hostage.
So the terrorists burst in to the Christmas party. They take hostage the CEO, Joe Takagi, and take him upstairs. And I did not remember the amount of computer stuff that happened in this movie. Like, they had hackers, they had touchscreen directories, and they needed passcodes to get in and unlock the vault.
For all the technology that happened in this movie, though, it would have been over in about 5 minutes if John McClane just had a cell phone.
Yeah.
Because they take the time to cut all the phone lines to the building, and I'm like, man, that actually, that would have worked. Blocking the elevators and stuff too. But yeah, this is a very tech savvy group, and I think this was the age in 1988 where we really started getting kind of obsessed with computers and PCs were appearing in the home. So it makes perfect sense. Although I was a little baffled by the electromagnetic shield over the vault. Is that a real thing? Can that actually happen?
I thought that's what protected the Death Star in Star Wars.
Or Yakuza vaults. That's not a standard defense. Don't you remember in Batman again, we're talking Dark Knight, that they electrified the vault?
That's right. And it killed one of the Joker's henchmen.
See, you guys think I'm being racist. I think I'm just laying out a case here for what's going on.
Yeah, if I'm to understand your case, it's that there's technology, there's Japanese people, and they've got money. That just sounds like a tech company, not Yakuza. Where are the tattoos, Dick?
So while all the terrorizing is going on within the Christmas party, John McClane is taking a horse bath, so he doesn't see any of this. He's got his shirt off, he's toweling off his underpits, and he's got his shoes off, making fists into the carpet to relax from his airplane. So he escapes and runs away to the roof.
That's correct. That's where he sees one of the terrorists, kills him, gets his radio, and makes the call to the emergency dispatch. And what kind of walkie-talkie does he have? This thing gets perfect signal throughout an entire building and about 300 yards down to the street. I've been on a cruise with the top-end walkie-talkie of today, and that won't go through 2 floors of a cruise ship. How does this thing work?
It's a pretty impressive walkie-talkie. When John McClane gives kind of the soliloquy when he's talking to Al Powell, the cop who's his buddy, his pal, over the CB, and he just tells him all these things he needs to tell his wife. There's no interruption in the signal, and Al hears everything perfectly and responds without even like waiting a beat between the two. Absolutely beautiful technology.
Was it also a good idea for John, knowing that the terrorists were listening, to talk to Al about what the police were doing? And, hey, the FBI's on the scene. They're running the standard playbook. I think you might want to be a little more selective in what you share over the open radio frequency.
There's got to be some sort of police code that, like, if I'm talking to my buddy Gene over there and he's another police officer, there's got to be some sort of code to where we can tell each other, hey, switch to channel 11, right? They stay on, like you said, they stay on the same channel as the terrorists. Like, what are we only to believe that there's no other channels?
I do love when John McClane makes that emergency CB call to the police, emergency line, and he gets them on there and drops again one of the gems of the lines of this movie when the lady's ass tells him, this frequency is only for emergencies. He goes, "What, I sound like I'm ordering a fucking pizza?" Like, just the F-bomb droppage in this movie it's pinpoint accuracy. These are cruise missiles of profanity.
So John McClane actually discovers that the one area of communication that the Germans have not cut was the fire alarm. So he sets the fire alarm. But why would the police emergency dispatch be also the same line that the terrorists are on?
Because back in 1980, I guess they only had one channel. It was channel 1. It was everybody. People be talking over each other all the time. I can't come up with any other reason.
Were they on the same frequency?
Yes.
He didn't switch frequencies to get the police?
No, and even if they did, how would he know it? He's from New York. What, do they all use the exact same emergency frequency?
No, he's just checking different channels until he finds something where someone responds.
The radio dispatcher sends a black... she sends Sergeant Al, who is on desk administrative leave, for shooting a 13-year-old kid. He's quite possibly one of the worst cops. And he's not even the worst cop in the police force because he's the only one that has a logical approach to what is happening at Nakatomi Towers. But even then, he doesn't do a full investigation when he shows up to the scene. He just walks in the lobby, assumes everything's fine, and walks out. While a body falls on a squad car.
Well, I don't think he was walking out after the body fell on his squad car. I think at that point, but it is interesting that even after that happens, then the deputy police chief says to him, it might just be, depressed stockbroker. They jump to their death sometime. That just happens to coincide with the fact that there's a fucking terrorist takeover of the building. Yeah, makes perfect sense.
So who threw the guy off the roof onto the car?
Well, John sees that Al is driving away. First, his fire department fire alarm didn't work. Now he sees the police leaving. Instead of throwing a desk chair or maybe shooting at the police car, something that he could just shoot the hood, he decides that is a hell of a throw. How do you throw a human body? We're going to say that terrorist was maybe 6'5", 210, solid muscle. How do you get him out the window and the 40 feet to the roundabout in front of the building? That's a pretty good throw.
Well, you notice when John McClane confronts his first terrorist kill of the entire movie, the guy says, you're a cop. You got to follow certain rules. And he says, well, that's what my captain tells me. Maybe John McClane is darker than we actually think. Maybe he makes a life practice of throwing dudes out of windows and indiscriminately killing. You don't know. So he could have been doing this for years. I mean, that is it's an art form for him. He is awfully good at killing people. I mean, what's his scorecard at the end of this movie? 12 deaths or something like that? He's a mass murderer.
So after throwing Marco's corpse onto Powell's car, the situation rapidly escalates and the SWAT team arrives to storm the building. However, due to the police ineptitude of what was the deputy chief's name again?
Dwayne T. Robinson.
Dwayne T. Robinson sends in the entire SWAT team, which it doesn't seem like a very highly skilled, trained SWAT team. They seemed almost like pansies.
They do fine unless you make them run through any like rose bushes. You see that one cop running, he stops. Oh, as he gets his hand caught on the thorn. We're led to believe these guys are clowns.
No, yeah, they are absolutely inept. I mean, there's kind of a Keystone Cops sort of element to the movie, which makes it even more enjoyable. The fact that like each time you think, oh, certainly now they've got the solution. Oh, the cops are here. They're going to fix this. Nope. Oh, well, the SWAT team's here. They're going to fix it. Nope. Oh, the armored personnel carrier's here. They're going to fix it. Nope. Oh, helicopters are here. They're going to fix it. Nope. They cannot get anything right, and it makes it hilarious. And as you can see, like it's adding to the madness of John McClane, where he's just kind of like, how the fuck is all this going wrong? And I'm going to have to do this by myself.
The SWAT team is repelled, but the amount of firepower.
Yeah, they throw everything they have at once. They roll out the armored car, and the terrorists are ready for it. They have a couple rockets. So they knock out the windows. They hit it the first time, and the car is disabled. They've repelled the attack, and Hans says, hit it again. They shoot another rocket and blow it up. Now, I was prior military, so I always take offense when we start seeing things that just are not accurate. John McClane is so upset that he's going to make a point. He takes the C4 that he has, sticks a couple blasting caps in it, puts it on top of a desk chair, puts a CRT monitor on top of it, wraps the cord around, and throws it down an elevator shaft. That would not explode. That's not how explosives work. Did you guys believe that would really happen?
I was really baffled by the apparatus that he was building. I thought some sort of MacGyver thing was going to happen, and then he just threw it down the elevator shaft, and I went, what the hell was that all about? So I can only assume, I thought, did he use one of the detonators? Like, was he triggering it remotely? But he wasn't. He just threw it down the elevator shaft, and it blew up. Yeah, I was a little confused by that part.
C4 is so stable. You can set it on fire as long as you don't have heat and compression. If you take C4 and burn it, and a lot of people in Vietnam used to use it to cook or to heat water for food. Now, if you were to burn a little piece and hit it with a hammer, yeah, you're going to lose your hand. There is no way that goes off. The physics of it's all wrong.
So when you talk about a suspension of disbelief, though, this is one of those situations where I just go, who fucking cares? Because I got to see a building blow up, and then that fireball that chases him up through the elevator shaft, that iconic scene, is just so good. It's so John McClane, where he's like, yeah, I just did something badass. Oh, God, I'm going to burn to death.
All I ask is they could have given him a fuse to light. Have something where he lights it to then set it off, but
Didn't he get a lighter from Marco or Tony, the terrorist he kills? And the first terrorist, he acquires his lighter. He could have used it to light the C4 before throwing it down the elevator.
Instead, he only uses it to light up his face while dropping one-liners in an AC duct.
Or expensive European cigarettes.
That's right.
That's the only thing that Zippo's for.
This is also where I didn't quite understand where Hans Gruber was coming from, is because he fucking throws out bazookas at the armored car, but tells his henchmen to just wound the officers, not actually kill them. What side of the fence are you doing on, Hans?
Well, I mean, and I think that I think Dick can speak to this. The best thing you can do in that sort of situation, if you want to get rid of 3 guys, is shoot one guy in the leg, because the other 2 guys got to take him back. So you're basically, snipers do this all the time. It's a classic move where you can actually like disable a large unit by just taking a couple guys and wounding them, and everyone else gets preoccupied with the wounded. He's trying to stall for time. He just wants to take as long as possible. You kill those guys, you're speeding up the clock.
Okay, so
that's correct. The U.S. rounds that we use, 5.56, they tumble. They're aimed at injuring and not killing. You hit one guy, it takes his 2 buddies to get him off the battlefield. So you are correct, Gene.
So let me ask you this then. What was the overall terrorist plan? What was their thing that they were doing with all the explosives?
I think what they were trying to do is spend more money actually executing this robbery than they would make from the robbery. Because buying those rockets on the black market, getting that much weaponry and getting all that coordinated and hiring those guys, that's going to cost you more than $600 million. Easy.
So I tried to break it down. I wrote down what they were trying to do. And correct me if I'm wrong. This is what I think is happening. I think this was Hans Gruber's plot. You enter Nakatomi Tower. You take out their communications. If Joe T doesn't give you the passcode, you hack in still. All the while creating a diversion by which you set C4 explosives on the roof of Nakatomi Tower, where you lead the hostages up and make the FBI or the police send you a helicopter to come get you. But then you set off the explosives and therefore killing the hostages and the helicopter. And are we then just supposed to think that all the hostages, all the terrorists escaped by ambulance underneath the building? Like, I don't understand what they were hoping to happen. If there's no terrorist escorting the hostages to the roof, what's to keep the hostages from not going up there?
So I think what they were trying to do is make them think that all the terrorists died in the explosion on the roof. So the helicopters are coming in and they're going to see a crowd of people on the roof, and then there's an explosion. They're going to think, oh God, everybody died up there. Like something went wrong with the terrorist plan. And meanwhile, they're escaping by ambulance. It's a weird. It's like the Rube Goldberg machine of heist plans. It's a terrible idea. For all the efficiency and brilliance that they have going in, their exit strategy is a complete disaster.
Well, again, I don't understand. Okay, so let's say you're one of the hostages, and they're telling you, and the terrorists are telling you, go to the roof, but we're not coming. It's just you guys. I'm not going to the roof. Fuck that noise. I'm going where the terrorists are going.
I'm sorry, there are helicopters coming, and there's a guy with a gun telling you to go to the roof. I go to the roof. I want to get on the helicopter and get the fuck out of here.
So all of a sudden, Roger's a tough guy. Roger, you are going to the roof. You just watched him shoot a few different people. You're going to the roof, and you've probably soiled yourself.
I've never said I'm tough. I've said by this point I probably have Helsinki syndrome, and I'm now attached to my terrorists.
You'd be the first one up there. They would have you on a sofa with the pregnant lady. That's how tough you are. So, yes, you would be on the roof. Granted, their plan, as perfect as it was, their exit strategy, like you said, Gene, was terrible. There are so many things wrong. The police would not assume all the terrorists died, but they also weren't planning on the LAPD rolling in a couple gunships with an M60 and start lighting up the LA skyline.
So all the explosions at Nakatomi Towers attract the attention of the press, led by sleazy reporter Richard Thornburg, and the FBI, led by the 2 Special Agent Johnsons. Now, this is the point of the movie where you expect that the FBI are coming up. Someone's going to take over from the ineptitude and the lack of tactical planning from the LAPD. Nope, not the case with the FBI.
Well, we did get the standard police trope where the higher organization comes in and drops the old, well, you're not in charge anymore, I am. So the FBI takes charge, and their brilliant move is to cut the power and then also just to pull out a couple, gunships. And we see them flying through L.A. real low. I don't know that they would be doing that. Flying through fully armed, and we see one of the Johnsons saying, woohoo, just like fucking Saigon, right, Slick? And the other Johnson says, I was in high school, dickhead. So many good interactions. The writing on this movie is fantastic. Do you think it's believable? Would they fly these two gunships through the LA skyline and start lighting up the roof of a building with terrorists and hostages?
I think at this point in the movie, nobody cares anymore. Like, it has spiraled so far out of control that is sheer entertainment at this point. I mean, you're throwing people off of buildings, tops of buildings are exploding, helicopters are flying by with Vietnam vets screaming their heads off. I mean, shit has gone off the rails, and I love it. I mean, it's you just don't care. It's so much fun.
Paul Gleason's subtle humor when he's playing the deputy chief. When the building blows up, the helicopters are in flames, potentially all the hostages are dead. And what does he say? Ooh, we're going to need some more FBI guys, I guess. That is comedy gold.
Oh, no. And there's, I mean, again with that writing, when, when Dwayne Robinson, calls John McClane an asshole, after seeing the entire armored personnel carrier get blown up, and McClane responds with, asshole, I'm not the one who just got butt fucked on national TV, Dwayne. Like, dropping that line, or when he's fighting, for his life, you got McClane saying, he says, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to cook you, I'm going to fucking eat you. Like, what is going on here? It's just great stuff.
So throughout the entire movie, we see people guns a-blazing. Not one person reloads a gun. Not once. Until the very end, we see John decides he's been shooting thousands of rounds and he's going to do a bullet count. So he opens up the clip, sees he has 2 bullets left, and this is where he comes down with the brilliant idea to take packing tape and tape his pistol to his back. I don't know what kind of tape this is. I have a difficult time taping a cardboard box together and having it really stay. A sweaty, greasy John McClane, I don't imagine that duct tape would really hold a pistol to his back. Do you believe that?
And we're not even talking like some sort of a composite. We're not. This thing doesn't look like a Glock. I mean, we're talking like a full Beretta. The thing looks heavy, and I'm not buying that at all. At the same time, that spot on his back, I can't reach that spot on my back. That is the spot that you ask people to scratch for you, and you're going to reach back, grab a gun from there, and take out 2 guys. And also that crossarm move when he gets that kill shot is just amazing.
Forget grabbing the gun when it's already taped to you. How do you tape it perfectly? Like, who's holding the gun for you while the other hand is trying to tape it? Like, I don't understand how that happens. Not even in Die Hard, but he pulls this same maneuver in Die Hard with a Vengeance.
Okay,
where he's got the gun taped behind his back with the sandwich board.
I mean, Raj, if we're going to talk about like incredulous activities here, this guy has jumped down a shaft, missed a grabbed another air vent, crawled through it. He's jumped off a building with a fire hose tied to him and gone through a window. He survived thousands of rounds being fired at him, fighting hand-to-hand with guys that were way bigger than him, and now we're having trouble with tape?
But this is why we love John McClane. He can do it. But I don't believe there's a tape good enough to hold that.
So why is he an everyman then? Like, we think that he is an everyman, but yet he's doing super heroic actions.
Okay, the reason, Roger, why he's an everyman is in this last scene when he comes to confront the guys that are holding his estranged wife hostage. He comes kind of shambling out. He's bleeding. He's got his foot bandaged. He's got a bullet that's ripped through his arm. He's just a fucking disaster. And all he says is, "Hi, honey," and walks out there. He's holding that machine or the submachine gun at waist level. He's a disaster. The pain that he takes, the damage he takes during this movie is this is an Dorian Gray situation, man. He is fucked up. So he's very human. but also can do some pretty superhuman things.
So he lulls Gruber into the trap, pulls out the gun, wounds Gruber. Gruber falls back with Holly in his clutches through the window, but grabs Holly, and he's hanging off the building by the watch that Holly is wearing.
There's a bit of foreshadowing early in the movie when Ellis keeps pointing out that Rolex, and it comes into play. And I wonder if Rolex took offense to the fact that it actually snaps off.
Didn't John McClane have to undo the Rolex for it to fall?
Yeah, he had to open the latch.
Right.
And that allowed it to come off her wrists, and he fell.
I did not remember that. I did not remember that at all.
Do you think that's the moment where inside she decides, you know what, I am Holly McClane?
I think she's afraid to. I wouldn't go against John at this point. You don't know what he's capable of. I would say, yes, John, I am Holly McClane. No more maiden name for me. I'm afraid of him.
I found myself having one really dark moment, though, a sad moment, a moment of silence when I see Alan Rickman falling to his death, and I realize, oh God, he's actually dead. It felt terrible. Now, I knew other people who had been in the movie who are also dead at this point, but something about it, he was so good at dying dramatically that it just made his actual death so much sadder.
So after this scene, you see all the hostages being led out of the building, into the police custody, into the first responders that are waiting for them. And then you see a beater, battered, bruised John McClane walking with Holly. And then, right in front of him, you see Powell just kind of looking at him. And they don't share, they don't say anything, but they share like a very special moment where they're just kind of looking at each other lovingly, and there's almost like there had been such a deep romance that had blossomed between John McClane and Al, more so than the Holly and John. Did you get that? There was definitely, like, I would not be upset if those characters got together at the end of the movie.
Oh, I definitely feel that there was more of a closeness between Al and John than there was between John and Holly. I don't understand how this situation created any sort of a lasting bond between the two of them. They weren't even around each other the entire movie, and they're both really, really high on adrenaline and and whatever else hormones are pumped out when your life is threatened over a multi-hour span. The true love story here is definitely John and Al.
And look back at the movie, rewatch that scene. Holly looks visibly upset that they're embracing. Like, as we learned throughout the other Die Hard movies, this relationship does not last. Do you think John McClane never got over Al? Like, even though he shares like a really tight-knit friendship with Zeus in Die Hard with a Vengeance, I think he always in the back of his mind wonders what could have happened with Sergeant Al. No? No one's coming with me on that one?
I don't disagree.
That's all you. You're going down that rabbit hole. But I want to talk about one thing here. Towards the end of the movie and in the final scenes, the use of music. Is there a more epic use of a song than Ode to Joy? Can you come up with any memory other than maybe Apocalypse Now with Ride of the Valkyries of music being such a memorable part of the movie?
Yes, Cry Little Sister from the Lost Boys.
I think also Home Alone made really good use of Christmas music to it sequenced it very well. That was very, very memorable. But yeah, this was a big one, and I think that it was even it appeared in, like, I think that was the entire ad campaign for Die Hard was just Ode to Joy was just exploding.
Die Hard has become such a popular movie that there are entire fan pages dedicated to Die Hard. There's fan fiction related to John McClane and other people. Like, there are really I did not understand the in-depth that the fans of Die Hard have done. It's almost like it's almost like Star Wars in the lore and the amount of people that have such a love for this movie and this franchise.
It's hard not to fall in love with Bruce Willis at his best. This movie cannot be carried without him, and it really reminded me of what made this guy a star. Like this is 88, and he's doing stuff that is still cool to this day, A, and B, some of his best work. So I've been a big fan of Bruce Willis for a long time, from The Fifth Element to Looper. But going back to this early in his career, and I also liked Moonlighting a lot too, just really reminds you of how good he is, where you just wanted him to have as much screen time as humanly possible.
Do you think, is it worth to talk about the terrorists throughout the 80s and 90s?
We talked a lot about the terrorists, but yeah, go ahead.
I think it's an interesting fact that it went from like when Russia was the threat, they were Russian, like that sort of thing, and then when the Middle East was the threat, they were Middle Eastern, and then when we had no threat, they were aliens.
Yeah, so I think like in the 1980s, you had the villains were always the Soviet Union. We have Red Dawn, where the Soviets attack. We have Chuck Norris and Invasion USA, where Miami is attacked by the Cuban troops, but they're led by the Soviet operatives. In Die Hard, we have the Germans, we have the Eastern Europeans. Delta Force was one of the first that we shifted over to Middle Eastern, where they had Hezbollah in it. Back to the Future, again, 85, we transition a bit towards away from Eastern European and Russia, where we have the Libyans. And then in the 90s, we start to actually lead into homegrown terrorist. Do you remember kind of what you thought of them in the 80s and 90s and how they shifted? Gene, you're of Middle Eastern descent. Do you have any any memory on it?
Well, it's really interesting because people always ask, did I experience any sort of racism or anything with regards to being Iranian and having that conflict between the U.S. and Iran, and not really. I mean, I just remember noting that when we shifted to aliens and robots as the bad guys, I thought, we're on the right track here globally. Like, there's probably the end of Islamic terrorism and the end of the Cold War. Like, they've run out of enemies to show us on the screen. That was pretty exciting. But in the 90s, I mean, not really. When it did start happening, the guys were just so overblown that they weren't even believable. And thankfully, I think they were always Arabs, so that kept me kind of in the clear.
In the 90s, we had a shift there towards domestic. After we had the attacks in 95 in Oklahoma City, we shifted towards Fight Club, 12 Monkeys, Speed, all domestic, until Executive Decision, the Seagal movie, where they shifted towards Islamic terrorists. I mean, that's recognized. GQ they had an article where they acknowledged that as kind of the turning point. So maybe we'll come back to a day where aliens again will be the enemy of the unified human front, so that, Gene, you can go back to enjoying our terrorist movies.
I just hope that shift doesn't require another Steven Seagal movie. If we can get through it without that. But I guess that would be a sacrifice that I could make.
If it's a Steven Seagal movie where he's killed in the first 15 minutes, I'm on board with that. So this is the part of the movie where we pull out the shadow meter and give our ratings. Again, a 0, gentlemen, is the perfect movie. It's a 0 wipe shit. There's nothing wrong with this movie. It cannot be remade. It is ultimate perfection. And a 5 is the worst piece of shit ever made. And you're moving through a Costco-sized bin of toilet paper. Gene, I'm going to start with you. What do you give this movie?
It's very hard for me to imagine any movie that is absolutely perfect, but this is about as close to perfect as it gets, keeping in mind the date, keeping in mind what filmmaking was in 1988. I'm going to go with one wipe. Near perfect, but not exactly what I wanted. I would say that there were some plot holes, some pretty big plot holes that I could forgive because it was so entertaining, but I did take note of them in my head.
I think, again, I always base it on, would I watch it again? Would I recommend it? How did the hour and a half fly by? And I think it was pretty close to perfect. The action sequences held up, but to me, what made the difference was the subtle comedy, was the writing. In a lot of the movies we've done so far, they're enjoyable, but the writing isn't exactly up to par with either the action or the special effects. Here, the subtle humor just kept me laughing. The action held up. I think you wouldn't have to remake it. Without knowing the technology, this could be made today. So for that reason, I have to give it half. It's not perfect. We haven't seen that yet, but it's as close to perfect as we've come yet. So I'm going half a wipe.
I think you touched on something there too that we should get back to is there's no effect in this movie that looked fake to me, right? They did it. It was masterful. You didn't have to excuse that effect that didn't quite work. They all worked.
Dick, I agree with you. This movie is nearly flawless, near perfection. There's a little bit, maybe even the redeeming shot at the end with Al, the brother breaking loose and then Al having to shoot him. I thought that kind of tipped the scales of like, did it, for as perfect as a movie it was, did they really need to add that at the end? That little exclamation point. I don't know. I think they could have just ended there. And so for me, it's half a wipe. So the average shadow meter is 2/3 of a wipe. This movie is the best movie we've seen thus far throughout the podcast.
So, Roger, why don't you tell everybody how they can follow us, how they can share, and how they can get in contact?
So the best way to get in contact with Shat the Movies is through our website. Go to shatthemovies.com. There you'll find links to all of our podcast distribution sites, including SoundCloud, iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, RSS, everywhere fine podcasts are found. You can also email us at hosts@shatthemovies.com. We're also on Twitter and Instagram @shatthemovies. So be sure to follow us on all of our social media and websites, and be sure to vote for the next movie. Big D, what are our next 4 movies that the audience can vote on?
So we had a request come in for My Cousin Vinny from a law student, so we're going to add that one. We have Crocodile Dundee. We have the always popular Predator and Willow. So make sure you vote, because that's how we pick the movies. It's up to you, the fans. Get engaged. Please vote, and please send us feedback. That's why we do it. We love to hear your stories and keep us fired up.
Also, if you have the chance, go on iTunes, leave a 5-star review. It's the way that we can move up the charts. Also, we do a sister podcast weekly every Monday, where we review the hit HBO television show Westworld. Find us at shatontv.com. That Westworld podcast is at shatontv.com. So that was the podcast. On behalf of my co-hosts Gene Lyons and Dick Ebert, this is the Raj saying, next time you're at the movies, be sure to leave a space between you and your buddy, or other people will think that you're together.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down to Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party.